exactly what many Christians have been taught. What surprised me, because I always imagined too that Satan was in the Garden of Eden. That's a Christian story, and
Mm.
it's in all Christian painting, right? That Satan was in the Garden of Eden. What surprised me was to see that in Jewish stories he's not there. That figure that Christians and Muslims call Satan isn't in the Hebrew Bible.
This is the Strange and Mysterious World podcast, in conjunction with Elucis TV. These are your hosts, Lee Stridham and William Collinson.
Welcome to Strange and Mysterious World, Season 6, Episode 6. And while we're on the sixes, we're going to be chatting about Satan. The origins of Satan. So, our guest today is one of the world's foremost historians of early Christianity, Professor Elaine Pagels. Elaine is a professor emerita of religion at Princeton University and has spent more than 5 decades researching the origins of Christianity, the New Testament, Gnosticism, and the remarkable discoveries of the Nag Hammadi texts. She came into international prominence with her groundbreaking book, The Gnostic Gospels, which won both the National Book Award and the National Book Critics Circle Award, and has since written a series of influential books, including Adam, Eve, and the Serpent Beyond Belief, The Secret Gospel of Thomas, Revelations, and the most recently, Miracles and Wonder. She has also been awarded the MacArthur Fellowship, often referred to as the Genus Grant, and in 2016 received the National Medal of Arts from President Barack Obama.
Elaine, I'm just so elated to have you here. Also, I mean, it's just so profound to have someone, because you are like the foremost historian of early Christianity. So, I mean, there's no better person to speak to but you about these topics. Yes, I was reading your book and it was amazing. And then I saw you were doing a lot of you were into the into the Gnostic gospel. So I went back into my library, and there was a book on that the Gospel of Thomas, which I'd read, and I thought it was amazing. And then I looked, and it was your name again on that book, and I was like, oh wow! So it's quite profound, like all of the books you've written about the Gnostic Gospels, about Christianity. I mean, and then also this book just finished, and the book of Revelations that you've written, that came up, and I started with that, and I can't wait to get stuck into that. It looks amazing. So let's just start. Like, how did you get interested in studying Christianity, and especially writing a book about Satan?
Well, I didn't expect to ever write a book about Satan, but I grew up in a family that was nominally Christian, but my father had decided that the kind of Christianity he was taught was damaging and terrible. Everybody was sentenced to hell. It was very ferocious Presbyterianism, he called it. And so as soon as he discovered science, he said, oh, we don't need that. Those are old folk tales. It's all in the past. It's like a vestigial part of evolution. We don't need those stories. So I grew up assuming that religion was just full of meaningless stories. But when I was 14, I was in an evangelical crusade, and it was very powerful, actually. And to my surprise, and my parents' horror, actually, I loved it. I got born again, right? And I joined an evangelical church and was deeply involved with it as a 14 and 15-year-old for about a year until a time when they told me that a friend of mine who'd been killed in an accident was going to hell because he wasn't an evangelical. He's Jewish. And I just walked out of that church then and never went back, because I thought, that's not what you told me about the love of God.
Yeah, sure.
But years later, I kept thinking, what was it about that experience uh, of sort of a spiritual rebirth that felt so powerful and really transformed the way understood everything at the time. And so I went back to a secular university where I wouldn't get one person's brand of Christianity and just asked, how do we know what actually happened? And as you know, William, there's so much we don't know. I would think there's probably 85% of the life of Jesus that we know nothing about because the Gospels are so short. The earliest one's 15 pages. But through the process of studying how Christianity began, somehow the scholar, the historian, merged with the spiritual seeker that was behind it. And so that's where the present work comes from.
All right. And then the book, The Origin of Satan, which I've just read, and it's amazing. So what made you want to write about the origin of Satan?
Well, as I said, it was not a plan. But at a certain point in my life, before I wrote it, the two people in the world that I love the most, my husband and my young child, both died, one of an illness and the other in an accident.
I'm so sorry.
And that was a devastating experience. And some minister whom I didn't like said, "You shouldn't be angry at God." And I thought, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not angry at God. I don't think God sends something like this, targets you and says, okay, this is a test. I don't, that doesn't make sense to me at all. I couldn't imagine believing in a God like that. So I thought in the ancient world, somebody would say that it comes from Satan, because in the book of Job, Job is just doing what he's supposed to be doing, and some spiritual being, they call him the Satan, is some kind of angel who throws obstacles at people. That's what his name means. He puts a massive obstacle in your way just to see what you're going to do. It's kind of curiosity. At least that's how it's explained, in order not to blame God in ancient Jewish culture. So I thought, well, okay. Of course, I was grieving terribly, but at the same time, I was also angry. How could these two things happen? You know, within a year, it was devastating. So I thought, well, I will think about who invented Satan. Where did that come from? Because by that time, I realized that, having been brought up nominally Christian, I imagined that Satan was in the Garden of Eden, the way that Michelangelo pictures Satan as a snake, a feminine snake, actually, too. But that's not that figure that Christians and Muslims call Satan, isn't in the Hebrew Bible. I mean, there's a character, they say, who throws obstacles at you, and people don't like him. He's like the angel of death, right? He does things that people don't like, but nevertheless, it's done only with permission of God. But in the New Testament, Satan is somebody who really brings evil things to happen, harmful and painful things. And that was the way the earlier followers of Jesus explained the death of Jesus. So I decided to try to find out where that figure comes from historically.
Okay, so can you tell us a bit, elaborate, like what happened? So, because yeah, I also went to, reading your book and also doing my own research. It was like in the Old Testament, just as you said, a person who put obstacles in. But if you can explain, then what happened? How did it develop into what it is today, where we like, when we just see like someone that we don't like, we like, Satan, you know?
Yes, that's so interesting. Of course, in ancient Egypt, there were spirits that were harmful, and Greeks too. I mean, they would have no problem explaining a terrible setback. They'd say, well, Apollo loves you, but but this other God doesn't. And so you're caught between two spiritual powers. But actually, that's what certain Jewish mystics and devout Jews came to believe right, well, about a century before the time of Jesus, because they were living in a situation in which their land, Judea, had been conquered by the Romans, and the Roman armies and military and the huge power of the empire was crushing the Jewish people, taxing them beyond their imagination, forcing them to do things, and sending soldiers in to kill people whenever they chose. So that divided the Jewish community. Jewish men called themselves sons of God, B'nai Elohim in Hebrew. And because they were more spiritual, they felt, than other people. And so, therefore, they were most affected by God's power. But at the same time, they said, at the time the Romans were conquering their land and destroying it, they said, somehow, besides Michael, the spiritual power, the angel who's the Lord of Israel, he's our protector, there's some other spiritual power fighting against him. We'll call him the Prince of Darkness. We'll call him without light, that name Beliar. We'll call him Beelzebul. There's many names. He's often called Prince of Darkness, the evil one. And that was because they would say, I realized when I was looking at these two groups of Jews fighting, one group was saying, we have to accommodate the Romans. We can't do anything else. We have to work with them. We have to obey them and just stop it. Stop fighting it because we can't win. And the most devout Jews withdrew from the Jewish community in the cities and went out to the Dead Sea and created this group they called the Holy Ones. We called them Essenes, which comes from the Hebrew Hasidim. And they said, we are the Holy Ones, and we are real Jews. We are God's sons, really. But you people who accommodate, you are Satan's people. You have given in to the dark side. And so it was about the split within a group of Jews. And what I realized is that the idea that Satan fights against God was not a question of supernatural powers up in the sky, having some kind of cosmic battle. I mean, it is that, but it's also seen right here on earth. That is, the New Testament story is all about the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth, as you know, and people opposed Jesus, and people loved him, and people hated him and put him to death. And so when I started to think, well, how did the followers of Jesus deal with this Satan figure? I think they adopted it from the Essenes. And so I went back to the Gospels and I said, okay, well, now if we're reading the story of Jesus and you and I believe that there's God up there and there's a dark, evil power fighting against God and trying to harm people, who is who? Who's on Satan's side and who's on God's side? So I went to the first gospel, Mark, and I said, okay, well, obviously in the story, because the story puts the life and death of Jesus in the context of this cosmic war between this good power of God, Spirit of God, and the evil spirit they call the Satan. So, of course, as you would guess, I started reading Mark's gospel, and I thought, well, of course, Jesus and his followers will be inspired by the Spirit of God. And the very first story tells about how the Spirit of God comes upon Jesus and immediately sends him into the desert to fight against the evil power, Satan. And Jesus goes into the wilderness alone. It's a kind of hand-to-hand combat, comes back victorious. He's defeated Satan, and he comes into the world to announce that the kingdom of God is coming. So as the Gospel of Mark sees it and the others, Jesus and his followers are God's people, and people who oppose him are Satan's people. But mainly it's the Jewish members of the community, because the Romans are not even part of the spiritual fight. So what I realized happens, and this really surprised me, but we all know it in a way, that as the evil power in Luke's gospel tries to tempt Jesus to follow Satan and not God, gives him tests. I'll give you the kingdoms of the world and everything. I'll give you everything if you worship me and not the Lord. And Jesus says no, and he always resists the Satan. And Jesus goes around healing people who are possessed by demons or afflicted by suffering and sickness and death, which they think are caused by Satan. That's why people said that to me. Somebody did this to you. It's either Satan or God. But that's the way they were thinking. And what really was distressing is that when you come to the death of Jesus, the crucifixion, which could only have happened because the Romans ordered it, the Roman governor was the only person in Judea authorized to pronounce the death penalty. So Jesus would have been convicted by Romans of insurrection against Rome. It's a Roman crime that Romans crucified Jesus under the claim that he was claiming to be this man says he's the king of the Jews. Well, the sign over the cross means don't try this. Don't rebel against the Romans, because this is going to happen to you. As you know, I mean, Jesus wasn't crucified alone. They say there were 3 people, but actually there were thousands. Thousands of Jewish men were crucified, seldom women, but they were people who were fighting to start a revolution to get their country back from Rome, the way the Americans fought the British to get their country back from Britain. But their revolution failed. So the story of Jesus tells how many, many Jews were killed exactly the same way. Jesus was charged with starting revolution against Rome. He wasn't guilty of that. I don't think. I think it's impossible. But that's what the Romans assumed about anyone who made trouble. But the result of that, as you know, is the story that who killed Jesus? Not the Romans get blamed in the Gospels, but other Jews. It really doesn't make sense historically, because if he were fighting for Israel against Rome, he would have been a hero to his own people, because there was a huge revolution after he died. 30 years after he died, 40 years, the revolution started in earnest, and the Romans came in and, they destroyed Jerusalem, they burned it down, they killed, robbed, murdered thousands and thousands of people and destroyed Jerusalem. So the Romans are certainly the culprits here, but the story was told differently. And that really surprised me. But
So,
the result.
yes, but I mean, so can you tell us why it was told differently?
Yes. I mean, we know the result that Christian anti-Semitism began when Constantine was emperor and the empire became Christian. So that falsehood has persisted to this day. Why would they say that? That's the important question. It's because followers of Jesus after his death were terrified. The men were terrified, particularly because few women were arrested and crucified, but many men were. All of the leaders of Jesus's followers, wherever they were in the Roman Empire, were brutally killed. First, I believe it was Paul, could have been the year 62. He was leading a group of Jesus's followers in the Roman Empire, and he was arrested and beheaded, which was a quicker and simpler way to die because he was a Roman emperor, a Roman citizen. But it was because he was leading people to believe that Jesus was the Messiah of the Jews. Jesus's brother James was lynched in Jerusalem, and his other famous follower, Peter, leading a group of Christians in Rome, was crucified as well. So all of the leaders were in danger. They knew they were in danger. So the way they told the story of how Jesus died was to say, in effect, Jesus wasn't an insurrectionist. This was a false charge. And we aren't either. Because if you admit that he was crucified by the Romans for insurrection, you're basically saying you're part of the same group. It's like saying, well, I know that you're a follower of bin Laden. I mean, you may deny it, but that's who you are. We know your politics. So the Romans assumed that all followers of Jesus were insurrectionists. And to protect themselves from brutal murder, which happened to hundreds and thousands of followers of Jesus in the 300 years after his death, on charges of being a follower of Jesus, they claimed that he wasn't a revolutionary, and neither were they. And to make that claim, they had to say, the Romans never thought he was a revolutionary. It was his own people who opposed him. And this was a completely false charge. But that charge stuck to this day. And many people, I mean, people I knew in high school in the United States, whether in California or in Massachusetts or New York, they were told the Jews killed Jesus. If you're Jewish, your people killed Jesus. And it's something that has shamed and denigrated Jewish people for 2,000 years. So I was shocked to realize I had no idea that that had happened.
Yeah.
I talked to one of my colleagues, Toni Morrison, the wonderful writer, and she was raised Catholic. She'd heard that her whole life. She said, well, Elaine, isn't Christianity all about love? And I said, well, at its best, it is. But some of it became about hate.
Yeah.
And it wasn't intentional on the part of the writers of the Gospels. They were just trying to protect their people from getting arrested and killed. But when a situation politically turned completely upside down and Christians were ruling, they actually created laws, very strict laws against Jews. For example, that if you converted someone to become Jewish who was not Jewish, you could be burned alive. I mean, these are cruel laws that were enacted as soon as the empire became Christian.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because the Old Testament's basically the Torah. So like the Christians are Jews. They Jewish. I mean, that's why when people say like, what is the word? Christian, Judaic, Christian, what is it? And then people say, no, that's an oxymoron. But it's like, no, but the Christians are Jews because it's the old Torah, that's the Testament. So it's just like the craziest thing, you know? And also, Jesus was meant to die because that was the prophecy. I mean, like that was, if he didn't die, it wouldn't have been it wouldn't be so powerful. So it was, so like, why are they so angry at the Jews when it was, if he didn't die, then they wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be as powerful as it's meant to be, you know, because that was supposed to be fulfilling the prophecy or the whole. So how can they be angry at them for something that was meant to happen? Otherwise, their religion wouldn't have actually existed. You know what I mean?
Well, those are two really important issues you raise. First, I have to explain to my students sometimes that Jesus wasn't a Christian.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
He was a Jew. Yeah.
He was Jewish. I mean, everything he teaches is Torah. He interprets Torah the way the other rabbis in the first century, Rabbi Shammai, Rabbi Hillel, they all teach about how to interpret the Torah, just as you said. What we call Christianity, which is a different movement saying, no, we're not Jews anymore. We are followers of Jesus, and this is a different view, and Jesus is God, which is something no Orthodox Jew could say, that a human being was the Lord. I mean, that's so counter. In Matthew's gospel, somebody says to Jesus, "Good master," and he says, "No, why do you call me good? There's only one that is good, and that is the Lord." Right? That's a very rabbinic statement. And if you read the Gospels in Greek, Jesus is called Rabbi in Greek. Rabbi Jesus. The second question is, if it was prophesied that Jesus had to die to save the sins of the world, that's John's view. Luke says, well, it may have been prophesied, but nevertheless, woe to the person by whom it happens. That is, they are still guilty. And Luke assumes that the Jewish people are guilty because that's what he had heard from Mark, from Matthew, and as a protection for his own people. So he goes with that. And he says, well, okay, even if he had to die, if you made it happen, you are guilty of murder, in effect. As Judas in the Gospels is seen as someone who committed suicide because he felt so guilty, having betrayed Jesus, or as somebody who simply died in a horrible way. That's Luke's version. Matthew says he committed suicide. So this story, as you know, has continued to this day. Did it surprise you to see how it came to be shaped that way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would think they would have thanked the Jews for killing him because he died to raise all of our sins. So if he didn't die, there would still be the sin on earth. So they should be thanking them. But then you put a good point in your book. It's like the origin of Satan was to create a them, we, them, separation. So
Yes.
so like when I'm reading the book, I'm thinking, well, yeah, Christianity, it's caused more separation than well, I mean, I don't want to say this, so people listening are going to hate
Anything
us,
else?
but it just seemed like it caused more like hatred than like or separation. You know what I mean? It's like, and Jesus was supposed to say like you got to love thy neighbor. You got to like you're supposed to bring us together and love each other. But now there's all this separation. Like I mean, my Christian friend that I love dearly, she so hates Islam, and I'm like, well, have you not read anything in your book? Because like we're supposed to love everybody. Now you like hating them, and it's to me it's the same. It's the same thing, really. Like I mean, I've read the some of the Quran, and it seems exactly. I mean, it's all the same message, like like deep down, you know. So it's like I just don't understand why they don't get it.
Well, it is a
Well, I have a
total.
quick question there.
Yes.
I have a question there before you guys carry on there. Sorry, man. This kind of leads into a question with regards to Christianity. So kind of what Wall's been going on about, where it actually stemmed from. And I think obviously being persecuted, originally the Christians were persecuted. That kind of that narration changed where they started doing the persecuting, because now if you look obviously with the Catholic guys, when they came in charge, all kings and queens kind of bowed to the Catholic bishops and to the priests, and nothing could get done without the Catholicism, without the go-ahead from the Pope, or without the go-ahead from the bishops. So I think this is where things went wrong. My opinion, this is only my opinion. I think this is where things went wrong. Instead of actually doing what Jesus said they're supposed to be doing, which is love thy neighbor, they never did that because something went wrong with the message that came forward, and it just became about power and greed. So I don't know if something right in the beginning, when who was Peter, I think, was the first pope. I stand to be corrected, but I think something happened in that beginning where things just completely changed, and that's exactly now the separation started happening. So it was Christianity against Islam, Islam against the Israelis, which is Judaism. So all of a sudden, you've got the three main religions, which are all derived from the one, all now separate, have their own
Yes.
have their own beliefs and have their own ideas of how and where we should be going. Where actually they're all cousins and they should be working together. So, what is in your opinion? What do you think went wrong?
Well, that's a very important point, because I think it started before the time of Jesus with the Essene group in the wilderness who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were devout Jews, but they separated themselves from other Jews, as I said, saying, we are God's people. And you used to be God's people, but now you've come under power of the evil one, the prince of darkness. And only we are truly God's people now. And that contrast was part of the legacy of Jesus and John the Baptist, who came out of the Essene group to say, we are giving the message of the kingdom of God. But a lot of people reject it and say Jesus is a fake. He's a traitor. By the chapter 3 in the Gospel of Mark, people are trying to kill him because they say he's a fraud. He's not the Messiah. And so you get this division throughout the history of the Christian movement. Some people in Judea who are his followers, many thousands actually. But you get some who are against him and who say, no, we have to get rid of him because he's especially when he started going into Jerusalem, being hailed as a king at Passover time, which was crowded with pilgrims, and basically saying, the king of Israel is coming. There were Roman soldiers all around at Passover time, and their job was to keep the peace, but they were afraid there was a revolution starting. Jesus went into the temple, and they say he cast down the tables of the money changers. He spoke the words of Jeremiah and Isaiah and said, this is run by people who are corrupt. Even they are the chief priests. They're corrupt. We are the true Jews. We're speaking the language of the prophets, and they are speaking the language of material profit and also political safety. Because Jesus's movement divided the Jewish people, that division came into that story quite powerfully. And as you say, and it was not damaging to the followers of Jesus for 300 years, because if you read the stories of what happened, people were being arrested. Are you a Christian? If you're a Christian, we're going to take you out and murder you in some awful way. Unless you're a citizen, then you have the privilege of being beheaded in private. That's what happened to the best known leaders and to hundreds and later thousands of others, until the year 312, when the ruler of the Roman Empire suddenly said, I'm in a battle. I'm either going to get killed tomorrow or I'm going to take over the empire. And he said he saw Jesus and as a sign, and he thought that Jesus could be his guardian. And he became a follower of Jesus and transformed the empire. And then gradually the law changed and became very strict laws against the Jews and many privileges for followers of Jesus. As you say, from the 3rd century, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, so-called Christian Europe is then also divided. The time of the Crusades, the Pope is preaching the book of Revelation. You have to go and get those heathen Muslims out of Jerusalem, kill them. because they are evil. We are God's people. That happened in every war in Europe. And, the history of England, Catholics and Protestants were also killing each other for 300 years, burning at the stake other Christians. And also Jews and also Muslims. So these kindred cultures, which totally came out of the same source, have had this as part of their history. I was so shocked by this that I had to write this book. And really, it was the hardest book I ever wrote. It was very painful to see how the message of God's love is Jesus's message, just as you said. But it carried an undercurrent that could mean something very different.
So, what is that undercurrent that means it's so different? Can you elaborate on that?
The undercurrent is that the Jews killed Jesus, and they deserve to be killed. They deserve to be punished. That has happened throughout the history of Christianity in Europe and other countries associated with it. Catholic countries, Protestant countries, certainly in the United States. You see now again the rise of Christian anti-Semitism. It's awful, and it's totally false. I believe it's based on a false premise, but the Bible says it. The New Testament tells the story that way to protect Jesus's followers, and later it becomes the way they are put in danger.
So, just to go back to the Satan thing again. So, Satan, the devil, and Lucifer, are they actually the same figure, or do those ideas develop separately over time?
If you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are written maybe, well, I don't know when they're written, because all we have are scrolls that are copied from earlier scrolls, but they were written down in the Dead Sea Scrolls about 40 years before the time Jesus was born. And they picture a great war of the children of God against the children of darkness. So that picture is sort of underlies the Christian movement in a way that I didn't realize at all until I began to look at this. And then if you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, they speak of these beings as the same. William, they speak of Beliar, the prince of darkness, Beelzebul, what are his other names? The Satan. They all mean the same being. He could also have many demonic powers on his side. So Jewish stories tell how Satan came out of the depths of the earth and challenged Michael in heaven and started a war in heaven and threw all of his angels out into outer darkness. And that becomes a Christian story. But it is one being with many spiritual helpers. So now you see the heavenly world divided, not just the Lord, but also the dark powers opposing him. That's part of Christian culture, as far back as we go, actually.
And then the word devil and Lucifer, how did those words get attached to it? Because is the devil, like, is that even mentioned in the New Testament? Because I know Satan's mentioned a few times, but like, or even Lucifer. When did that come about? Do you
Yes.
know?
Well, they're the same root. Luciferos means light bearer. He was originally seen as an angel, right? And yet, you mentioned another name. It was
The devil and Lucifer.
the devil. I'm trying to think. If you look at the 3rd chapter of Mark's Gospel, it says, oh no, it's not in Mark. 3rd chapter in Luke. It's further in Matthew. You remember the story of the 3 temptations? The devil takes Jesus up on a high mountain and offers him all the kingdoms of the world and offers him all the power in the world and tries to transfer his loyalty from the Lord to the evil one. And Jesus refuses the temptations. Those stories were added later after Mark. Mark doesn't have them. But Luke says the devil took him up on top of a high mountain and said, I will give you all the kingdoms of the world. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Satan means the opposer, the one who's opposed to God. So all of these names have meaning in Hebrew. Satan is a verb meaning to oppose. It's used in the Hebrew Bible, but it's not a personal name. It becomes kind of like a single being in the New Testament, but he has many names, as, say, Milton's Paradise Lost calls him by all of those names.
Oh. So, Lee, do you have a question there?
No. Look, obviously, in the Hebrew Bible, it's kind of almost, it comes across as when God is talking to him, it's like almost like in court, where he comes across as like an accuser, where he's like,
Yeah.
you get the defendant, and obviously so he's on the other side, and he will say, okay, this is what my plan is, and this is what I go forward to do. And I know with the Muslims, with the Muslim belief, they believe that nothing happens without God's permission. So it can't, if something bad is going to happen to the world or something, it can't happen without the permission of God. If God was against it, he would stop it, but he would let it go if he deems it necessary. So I don't know. In the Hebrew side of things, it seems to be there needs to be someone as an other side. There's other. Sorry, and I'm going to go back a little bit as well. Obviously, we've been running this podcast for quite some time, and we've been chatting to a lot of different people, and different theories and different views and that kind of stuff. And what came across quite interesting. I can't remember who we spoke to this about it, but they said that right in the beginning, when Adam and Eve were still in the garden, it was the two of them. God gave them reign over the garden. They had certain duties and responsibilities to adhere to, but it almost became stagnant. Nothing was happening. I mean, it's just the two people. You know what I mean? There was no other people in the world. It was just these two. And in order for humanity to become, or to evolve, or to get past the two, there had to be some sort of intercession, some sort of thing that goes forward and says, okay, this is now where the devil or Lucifer or the serpent or whatever you want to call the name comes into the picture and says, all right, goes to Eve and says, this is the power of good and evil. This is what you will know. This is, and eat that fruit. And then from there, actually, if it wasn't for that, it would still only be Adam and Eve in the garden. So what a lot of theories are saying is that it had to happen so humanity could be born. Because without that specific moment in time, humanity would still be, we wouldn't be. So I don't know. What do you? It's something that I remember listening to, and I thought that was quite interesting. But what is your thoughts?
What you're saying is exactly what many Christians have been taught. What surprised me, because I always imagined too that Satan was in the Garden of Eden. That's a Christian story, and it's in all Christian painting, right? That Satan was in the Garden of Eden. What surprised me was to see that that in Jewish stories, he's not there. It's just a cunning serpent. He's not the power of evil. He's just a clever serpent who tries to trick you. That it's Christians who put him in the Garden of Eden. Now, so Jews will say, well, how did sin happen? They say, because within each of us, there are two impulses. We are born with two impulses. God created us with a good impulse. They call it the Yetzer Tov, and the Yetzer Hara. That's the evil impulse. And the story of the Garden of Eden is intended in Jewish midrash, which means the elaboration of the story, to say to you, You have been created with a good impulse and an evil impulse, and Adam followed the evil impulse. And this is a story which is meant to teach you what not to do. But Christians decided that the evil impulse was there from the beginning. This is a Christian story. But Jewish stories would say Adam took the wrong choice, and we're telling you the story so that you will make the right choice. You will follow the Torah, you will obey the Lord, and you will not obey the voice of your own evil, selfish instincts. So that's when I discovered that Jewish tradition only speaks of Satan after Christians have introduced him for several hundred years. You find it in interpretations of Genesis, but he's not there before the Christians put him there.
Oh, wow.
It's quite a different story.
Wow.
But
Geez. So,
yeah,
Elaine, I wanted to ask you, so, I mean, you've been researching this for what, 5 decades?
yes.
So, with everything you've researched, do you think that Jesus was a real person?
That's an important question. Let me go back for a moment to the other question.
Yes, sir.
One way you can see how the stories are changed is in the book of Chronicles and the book of 1 Samuel, when King David decided to create a census in Israel. And many Jews were furious that he created a census, because what's it for? It's for taxation, and it's for military conscription. And one story in the Hebrew Bible, this is long before Jesus, will say the Lord impelled Satan, the Lord told David to create a census. And David feels so guilty for it that he has to do penance himself, because it's a wrong thing to do. The other story changes it and says the Satan incited David. So Satan is present in the book of Job. You're perfectly right. But he can only do, as you said, what God allows. When you get to the stories written hundreds of years later among the Essenes, the Jewish community dominated by Rome, they believe that Satan has been there, that Satan is really able to challenge the Lord indefinitely. That's where we get that idea. Also in the first chapter of Mark's Gospel. The question of whether Jesus is a real person, I think, is the most basic question of all, and we have to talk about it. Some people have argued that Jesus is fictional, sort of like Superman, you know? He does all these amazing things. He has enemies, but he always wins. He comes back in the end and everything's fine. Well, that is the story in the Gospels of Jesus' victory over death and sin. Wait a minute, I've got to think about that story now. And if that were the only kind of evidence we had of the life and death of Jesus, we might say he was an invented character, as some historians have claimed. But the reason I'm convinced that Jesus was an actual human being is that people who write about him are people who love and follow him, the gospel writers. There are other people who write about him who hate and despise him. And you can see this in the writings of Senator Tacitus in the 1st century. He says, oh, this Christus person, whoever he was, he started a horrible superstition, and this filthy movement came out and converted a bunch of low-class people, and we have to get rid of them. Suetonius, another Roman in the 1st century, living at the time of Jesus, like Senator Tacitus says, oh, this Jesus, he was somebody, we call him Christus, we don't know what his name was. He led these Jews astray and he started this awful movement. And Nero hated them so much that he burned them alive in his gardens, trying to get rid of them. These Jews, he calls them Jews, these Jews were sent out of the city of Rome. Jesus's followers were probably sent out of the city of Rome at one point. So we know that the people who hated Jesus also wrote about him, knew the story. A third of those people is Josephus, who is a Jewish aristocrat, wealthy, educated, knowledgeable about politics in the extreme, because he writes a massive book about the Jewish war and about his own culture as a Jew after the life and death of Jesus. And he too says, oh, this Jesus person, he was leading people astray, our people. So some of the leaders of the temple turned him over to the governor, the Roman governor, Pilate, and they crucified him. So there were Jews implicated in turning Jesus over to the governor, and those were the aristocrats who had to keep the peace in Jerusalem, or else the Romans would come in and start killing people. This is well known by people who are scholars. So you have one Roman senator, one Roman biographer, and one famous Jewish educator who write about Jesus of Nazareth and despise him and think that his execution was absolutely correct. So because of that, a lot of people knew he was a real person. They didn't make up the story. I think it's certainly likely that Jesus was a real person.
Did those guys write that before the?
A quick question on that.
Sorry, go for it, Lee.
No, they wrote them after. I mean, nothing was written at the time of Jesus's life and death. Tacitus was writing in the years of 60s. Suetonius was writing after that, but he was alive at the time of Jesus. And so was Josephus. He was a general in the Jewish war. He was writing about the time the Gospels were written and saying, oh, that Jesus, yes, we got rid of him. The Romans did away with him because he was causing trouble among the Jews.
Okay.
So you can look those up. If you look up the names of Tacitus, Suetonius, and Josephus,
I saw that because like the first Mark's gospel was written like 30 years after his death, right? Jesus' death.
30 or 40, something like that. Yeah, we're not exactly sure.
When those two guys wrote about Jesus, it was like 50 years after his death or something, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So when I realized that, I was like, yeah, well, maybe the whole Christian thing kicked off, and then Mark wrote that first gospel, and then it started like getting this popularity, even though maybe he wasn't around. They just was trying to start this movement. So then those guys decided to say something as well to try and discredit him, to try and like make it look like it was that he was a bad person, and maybe he wasn't ever there. They just, because this movement was there, they had to try and discredit it, so they wrote something about it as well. That's what I thought maybe could have happened, being if I had to play devil's advocate. Excuse the pun, but yeah.
Most historians would agree with you, because by that time, the Romans knew that there were these Christus people, and they were causing trouble. They were saying that, that Jesus had conquered the empire and he was coming back and he was going to rule the world. Romans didn't like that kind of talk. Not at all. And Jews who were in agreement with Rome, like Josephus after the war, also felt that he was dangerous for the Jewish people because he was getting them killed, those followers of Jesus.
Yeah. I suppose, if he was going to say something that would really discredit it, he could just say, what are you guys talking about? I was around then and he never existed. So what are you guys even talking about? That would have probably been more powerful.
If you love Jesus, if you follow Jesus, you wouldn't say he was crucified. That's a terrible, disgraceful thing for anyone. I mean, it's like saying he was an enemy of the state. I mean, why would you say that if it hadn't happened? But they said, as you commented, it was done for a reason. There was a divine plan, in effect. So that comforted the Christians that it wasn't just a total mistake of justice, which is how many people saw it, as it was, I think, because Jesus, almost all the evidence shows that he was not a revolutionary. They say, well, we know he was innocent, but there was a lot of division about that story, about him, because mainly the people who were his followers were slaves. They were rabble. They were not Roman citizens. Paul was very rare to be in that group. But these people were the lowest people, saying, God came to somebody like us. If you can say God is with us, that Jesus is God with us, Emmanuel in Hebrew, God is with us in this Jesus. He could be with me if I'm a slave, if I'm nobody. And that's very different than worshiping the gods that support the Roman emperor and the armies and the wars and the domination of your enemy.
Sorry, Lee, did you want to say something? Then I cut you off there, dude.
No, that's fine. What I wanted to find out, there was two very important books that were found at the Nag Hammadi Library. One being the Gospel of Thomas, and the other one being the Gospel of Mary. Mary is obviously very, very short, but it seems like both of them were written at the time that Jesus was alive, and obviously it's direct kind of. It's direct words, especially from Thomas's side. It's direct wording from Jesus. What do you think of the Book of Thomas and the Book of Mary? Do you think there's some substance to it? Because it seems like Thomas is almost talking something a little bit. The message seems to be slightly different, more esoteric than the conventional message that's coming through. So, what are your thoughts on that, Elaine?
It's certainly clear that the Gospel of Thomas offers a different message. And if you read the 4th chapter of Mark, it says, when Jesus was alone with his disciples, he said to them, to you alone is given the mystery of the kingdom of God. But to these people out here in public, I'm just telling them parables. So Jesus taught in two ways, Mark says. One way he taught to thousands of people was in parables. And Mark says it wasn't to make things simple. It was so they really wouldn't understand the deeper message, because the Gospels of Mark and Thomas are not contradictory. Mark tells you the public teaching of Jesus. The Gospel of Thomas claims to tell you the secret teaching. Now, we don't know when Thomas was written, because both Matthew and Luke tell you the same secret teaching that's in Thomas. Half of Thomas is identical with Matthew and Luke, but those were written after the death of Jesus because so many people were illiterate, right? His followers were fishermen. They weren't educated. So they had to remember. They had much better memories than we do, and they would try to memorize things. Jesus memorized large parts of the Psalms, large parts of the Hebrew Bible, but he may not have even been able to read. Many people memorized. So those Gospels were written later. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene actually was not found at Nag Hammadi. It was found in 1896 in a large pile of dump, in a dump that had a lot of pieces of papyrus in it, a lot of wills, bills, financial transactions, and fragments of Gospels, fragments of Plato's writings, things people had thrown away. And there was this half of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Nobody wrote about it because there were no women on the team. I was the only woman on the team initially at Harvard, and that was 70 years later. And then there were a couple women on the team. They got very interested because in that gospel, Mary is seen as an actual disciple. She corrects Peter, which makes him angry. And he says she's lying, that she has secret teaching from the Lord. And she wins the argument, which is an excellent reason why it's not in the New Testament. The Gospel of Thomas also pictures Mary Magdalene and Salome, not Herod's niece, but a follower of Jesus named Salome, as his disciples. Many secret Gospels picture women among the disciples. They're the minority, but they're there. And all of those were rejected from what became the canon about 400 years later. That wasn't settled until, well, we think between 400 and 450, when a bishop in Jerusalem gives you the whole list, when another bishop in Judea, Eusebius, tried to figure out what was the right list for what would become what we call the New Testament. That was created hundreds of years after the time of Jesus.
Mm.
So it's really interesting how much we didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love in your book how you actually like took the Gospel of Thomas and you like showed the contradictions. You like put it next to I think it was, I don't know if it was Mark or one of the other Gospels, and you showed like how it was so different. Like it contradicted what it was saying. That was like really profound. Like what do you
It
think it
is
was?
true. It's the Gospel of John, and again, they could be seen as basic teaching and secret teaching, because John's whole message about Jesus, what is it?
To love thy
The
neighbor.
only begotten. There's only one Son of God, one Son of God. And if you aren't saved by that Son of God, you go into eternal darkness. That's John 3:16-18. Whoever is born again into the name of the Son of God has eternal life, and whoever isn't goes into eternal darkness. John says there's only one Son of God. And I kept thinking, why does John keep saying this? Jesus doesn't talk about the kingdom of God at all in John, once briefly. He just keeps saying, I am the light, I am the way, I am the path, I am the water that comes from down from heaven, I am the bread of heaven, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God except through me. So John makes one point, and that is that Jesus is the same as the Lord in heaven. And he actually says, you must believe that I am he. Who? He says, I am. Before Abraham was, I am.
Mm.
So he says, I am the God who has always been Israel's God. However, why would he keep saying that? I think it's because other people, some people, were saying, the Gospel of Thomas says that when you come to understand the secret teaching of the kingdom of God, you understand that you are a son of God. You are a child of God. Why? Because of Genesis, because you were created in the image. And because you're created in the image of God, it's a metaphor that means the divine energy from which you come, from which you were created, is a living energy within you. You may not know this. You may think your name is just William Collinson, but that's not who you are on a deep level. On a deeper level, you are William Collinson, but on a deeper level, you are a child of God, even though you may be totally ignorant of having a spiritual identity. But the Gospel of Thomas teaches that. However, you don't teach that as an elementary teaching. Can you see why not?
Take the power
If
away
you
from the
say to
people.
somebody, yeah, if you say to somebody who's kind of arrogant, you are the Son of God, he can go around like a megalomaniac. I'm
Delusional.
God. You have to obey me. I'm the Son of God.
I see.
I mean, it can lead to real foolishness and blasphemy.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
As a lot of people who are diagnosed as insane have claimed that they are God, or they are speaking exactly what God has told them. And of course, there are prophets to whom God spoke. So how do you discriminate? That's not elementary teaching. That's only for people, Paul says, who are spiritually mature. That's why he says he doesn't give secret teaching to babies. That's in 1 Corinthians 2 and 3. He says, I can't tell you the secret teaching. You're just babies in Christ. Just say Christ died for you. That's enough. That's the basic gospel. That's all you need. If you go further, you might discover something deeper. And rabbis always taught, as they do today, elementary things to the congregation, thousands of people, and deeper teaching to advanced level spiritual seekers, as Christians do to this day. Those people go to seminaries, they study theology, they think about what the deeper meaning might be.
Mm.
You don't think that, because, I believe firmly that we all have the divine spark and we all have the divinity within us, and God is like within and always around. But do you not think that's, again, sorry, I'm bringing up Catholicism on this side, yeah, but they've now got an intermediary that between you and God. So if there's somebody that's going to forgive your sins, you've got to go and see a priest, and he's going to give you 10 Hail Marys, and and there you go.
Right.
Where again, this is just an opinion, but it's you don't actually need an intermediary, and I think that's also what Jesus was trying to say. Your directness to God is you direct. You don't need to have somebody to kind of be the buffer. You can go directly to God and talk to God. Again, but and I think this is where division comes as well, because as much as I agree 100%, there's a secret teaching. There's certain people that shouldn't be having those teachings and understandings because it can get taken in a very wrong direction. I think it might also, in a way, create division, because if we knew that we didn't need to have somebody to go and look, I suppose it's nice to have somebody to talk to when you've done something wrong. It's nice to sit down and talk to somebody like a psychologist, talk to somebody that, look, this is what's happened, and they can get into your mind and they can talk about it. A nice priest can do that sort of thing. But when you've got to go to a priest to get to God, and then he's going to give you your punishment, I don't know. I disagree with that. That sentiment, but that's just me. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, what the early church thought was that you could have had that kind of church. You could have had a church that tells the elementary teaching to the public in the service. The priest speaks, right? People don't usually read the Bible. The priest reads it to them. The priest interprets it for them. You have to go through the priest and the bishop. Otherwise, you can't get to God. That's what we call orthodoxy, straight thinking. And the church decided that you should not teach secret teaching. But every other tradition, whether it's Jewish, there's Kabbalah, there's Islam, which has Sufism, there's Buddhism, which has Tantra, Hinduism has secret teaching. Every tradition does. And Christianity did too. But the Catholic Church said, no, that's going to confuse too many people. It's good. We have to keep them straight, and they should just listen to us. And many people need that, and many people find God that way and find the gospel that way. But in the early church, the bishops did not trust the people. They were not literate. They couldn't read the Bible. So they had to have somebody read it to them. So they simply decided to bury the secret teaching and claim there wasn't any. I mean, you shouldn't listen to that. And even mystics of the church, St. John of the Cross, um, Sister Teresa, um, people like Meister Eckhart were condemned as heretics sometimes.
Mm.
They were in danger of being thought of as demonic because they said they went deeper.
Oh. So just with because Kabbalah for Judaism, Sufism for Islam, you said Tantra for Buddhism, but so what was the mystical secret teachings of Christianity? Was it Martinism or what was it?
I don't know about Montanism because we don't have much of their evidence. The Gospel of Thomas, these are the secret words which the living Jesus spoke, and Judas Thomas wrote them down. The Gospel of Mary says, Jesus came to Mary in a dream and spoke to her. Is it revelation or is it heresy? That's the question over which Christians split. But the others, like the Gospel of Philip, found at Nag Hammadi, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of the Egyptians, some of them say different things. So I think you have to discriminate. The use of orthodoxy is you don't have to think about it. Somebody has said, read these, not those.
Mm.
But if you question orthodoxy and you study other gospels, you don't have the authority of which Lee speaks. You have to become your own authority. Does that sound like truth to you? The gospel of truth sounds like truth to me. It doesn't contradict the gospel. It just tells a beautiful, different version. The Gospel of Thomas sounds like truth to me. I sometimes think the Gospel of Mary does as well. Not every gospel would. So it takes discrimination, and orthodoxy was meant to protect illiterate people from going the wrong way, as you said.
Okay, it wasn't like a power thing for the church. Um, so what about the secret book of John? Is it called the secret book of John? I mean, I was trying to read it the other night. I couldn't understand the thing that it was saying. It was very weird as well. Like, but it was a secret. Was it called the secret book of John?
It's called the Apocryphon, which means the secret book, literally, Apocryphon of John.
Yes. What do you think
It's
of that?
totally different. It's not a gospel. It's not a gospel. It's the Gospel of Philip is a kind of interpretation of the Gospels, which is a very interesting text, an esoteric text, and the treatise on resurrection is an esoteric interpretation of resurrection to mean spiritual awakening. The Apocryphon of John is different. It's about what happened before the universe and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, it was like reading a dream. It was like reading the book of Revelations. I mean, it was even saying like there's an entity for your nose and an entity for your shoulder. It actually sounded kind of kabbalistic in a way. It was like
It
so
does, and
strange.
you're totally right, it comes out of Egyptian magic. Because in Egyptian magic, if you're sick, the priest instructed in esoteric Egyptian medicine would find if you have trouble with your heart, he would find a gem made out of a ruby, perhaps, and it would have the name of a divine spirit on it, and it would have an image of a divine spirit. If you look at magical gems in antiquity, you'll see them. They have a name of a spirit who is the guardian of the heart. And these are Egyptian priests, Egyptian magic. So they will put that on your heart and they will speak the words on that gem and they will pray to the deity or this divine spirit who's in charge of the heart. Or if it's the liver, they might have a yellow uh, uh, gem with the same sacred engravings and powerful names in Egyptian, or it might be in Hebrew or Greek. and they will pray to the deity that's in charge of the liver.
The liver
And so
deities.
you're right. This is all mixed up with Egyptian and other lore. And there are other poems at Nag Hammadi, like Thunder Perfect Mind, that talk about the goddess Isis. They talk about the book of Genesis and Adam and Eve. They're quite mixed with Greek and Egyptian and possibly Indian cultural teachings. But some texts are much better than others. I think Thomas is one of them. The Gospel of Philip, the Treatise on Resurrection. These are part of a single tradition, which don't involve any other gods or anything like that. So those are the ones I focus on, the ones that I think are the closest to what we find in the traditional Gospels, right?
Lee, you got a question?
No. Cool. I think that's very,
So,
very cool. Very interesting.
Elaine, what I loved what you said, I don't know, it was like in the beginning of your book, or I don't know where it was, but you said you were like, the main teaching of the Torah is treat thy neighbor how you would want to be treated, and the rest is all commentary. Sorry, I think I'm really like bastardizing what you said, but that's how I interpreted it. I just thought that was a bit wonderful.
Well, that's a Jewish saying by
Oh,
a different rabbi, I believe, that, someone says to the rabbi, might have been Hillel, who was a contemporary of Jesus, um, will you teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one leg? and and supposedly the rabbi says, um, do not do to others what you would not have done to yourself. And that is the whole Torah. The Torah is about 10 Commandments. Do not do harm. Don't lie to your neighbor. Don't steal. Don't betray. Don't kill. And that's what Jesus teaches. And he goes further. He says, you can even love your enemies. You can even be better than the Torah. And he's interpreting the Torah because he's teaching that the kingdom is coming very soon. Or he's teaching that this is even a better way than other rabbis have taught. The Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Plain in Luke.
So, Elaine, also, I've got like two more questions. Sorry, I need to see you running out of time here. But firstly, like the Roman gods, like how come they lost faith in their gods? Is it just because of the persecution of Christianity, or like how did it just suddenly die out?
That's a very good question. A lot of historians say it didn't suddenly die out. It took hundreds of years. And probably wouldn't have. There was really a fight about that. A lot of people were loyal to the traditional gods. But after Constantine, he didn't make Rome Christian. He said, "Oh, you can worship any god. You can worship Apollo. You can worship the gods, but I follow Christ." His successors came closer to Christian orthodoxy, which says, no, we come from Jewish tradition. There are no other gods. Those gods are false. There's only one God. And that's the Father of Jesus. So that took hundreds of years to implement in the Roman Empire. It certainly didn't die out without a fight. I mean, the Emperor Julian was raised Christian in the 3rd century, and he'd seen his family killed by emperors who called themselves Christians, and he tried to go back to the old gods and abolish Christianity. But it didn't work.
Oh. And then I think my last question, I mean, this is a bit more philosophical than a historical question, but do you think that Christianity was necessary to change the consciousness of humanity to what it is today? or do you think it would have just like if you go into like the Hindu philosophy of like how our consciousness changes over time anyway through the yuga cycles, and it goes through these periods of enlightenment to the dark ages to enlightenment, and it keeps on going like that. Or do you think Christianity, because like I get a bit annoyed sometimes because I feel like I mean, through my research, it shows that Christians actually murdered more people than any other religion. The religion. I'm not saying Christians themselves. I'm just saying the religion. Um, but and also they think it's the Islam. But if you like, my research shows that the Christians actually killed way more people than the Islam. But maybe it was necessary to bring our consciousness to this like moral code that we have today. And maybe that was a necessary, like that was like kind of evolution. That's how we evolve, even though it's got a horrible history. Or do you think if there was no Christianity, we would have just got to this point of, I mean, because we are like a lot more, I mean, our consciousness, I mean, look, we had slavery 100 years ago. I mean, we've changed so much. I mean, we used to smoke cigarettes like we on planes, and doctors would subscribe it to pregnant women. So, I mean, I used to get hit by my parents, like beaten, like when I did something naughty, but now we don't hit. I mean, so our consciousness has changed so rapidly over the last 100 years. But I mean, I'm just trying to think, if Christianity wasn't involved in it, would we have got to this point, or did we need it?
Those are a lot of important questions. I don't know. It's counter historical, and we don't know. Um, it seems to me, though, when people say Christians have killed more people, that's because we're talking about a history that goes back to the 4th century or to the 1st century. Before that, can you imagine how many people were killed by the Roman Empire? We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They died nameless. There were thousands of Jews, thousands of Germans, thousands of others who rebelled against Roman domination in Britain, in Germany, in Spain, in Africa.
Yes, sure.
I mean, countless people that we know nothing about. So I don't agree necessarily. How would you know that between the 4th century and here you're talking about 2,000 years?
Yeah.
We know 2,000 years of history much better than we know the 2,000 that preceded. But there's evidence that masses of people have been murdered and killed by climate change and all kinds of other things. So I don't know if that would be an evolution or not. But it is true. On the other hand, in the United States right now, we're seeing people go back and say we're perfectly right to kill people who aren't citizens in this country. That's totally illegal by our Constitution. But
Wow, that's crazy.
we hear this from people in power who say that people who aren't our citizens are animals. This is coming from the White House, not only from the person who supposedly rules it, but his closest advisors like Stephen Miller. He's saying these people are animals. We should just get rid of them. The world doesn't need them. Let's just let them die. Let's separate their children and tell them to go back and die of hunger because we're not supporting parts of the world that are facing starvation now. In Africa, in the Middle East, we don't care. And so there's a battle right now about power and wealth and people who agree with you that we have become more aware of our obligations to other people. I find when I teach Jesus and Buddha with my colleague who's a specialist in Buddhism, they don't say the same things at all about Buddha as they say about Jesus, about life and death and spirits and lifetimes. But when they talk about people, Christianity and Buddhism say, do not do harm. You must support other humans because humans are precious.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
And that to
absolutely.
me is the simplest statement, you know.
Yeah.
And there, it goes back to Genesis, created in the image. Human rights groups in Israel always quote that, but I think it's where it comes. The idea that, as you said, the image of God is within each person, and they are not to be harmed, they are to be cared for.
Wow. And where's your
That I agree with
spirituality?
100%. Because
Sorry, Lee.
if you're fighting with somebody, you're fighting against God, and that's the whole thing. You're fighting against yourself. You're fighting against your own
Yeah, well said,
creation.
Lee.
So yeah.
Wow, Lee, that's very it's true. Huh? So, but Elaine, so where are you like Christian now? What is your faith? Like, doing all this research, has it made you like a Buddhist now?
Well, as I said, I mean, I was brought up Christian. I love this tradition in many ways. Some things about it I don't love at all because they're terrible that Christians have done and said. But yes, I mean, this is a tradition that I love. And as I said, I started out, I'm just going to look at the history. And some people who do that say, oh, well, you see, I mean, he was just a rabbi, he was wrong, and then they turned him into God, and the whole thing is a big mistake. My colleague Bart Ehrman does that. He says, well, you know, Jesus was just somebody they picked up and turned into God. He's now an atheist. He was a Christian. For me, it's happened the opposite way. As I said, the spiritual search behind what I set out as a historical, let's just have the facts, have pretty much merged. And I find that if you take the Gospel of Thomas with the other Gospels and some of the secret Gospels, they open it up. They speak about God loving those who acknowledge that we all belong to the same family. That's the teaching of Thomas. And we must treat each other as family members, no matter who we are. Um,
All right. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you, Elaine. I think that's a great way to end it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation and appreciated all of the important questions you've raised. Thank
Well,
you.
we're just honored to have you on here. So
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine. Yeah.
thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it, especially
Thank
your
you.
statue. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it too. Thank you.
And I love your books, and I can't wait to carry on reading the rest of them. So,
Oh yeah, the new one I liked turned in a new direction. I don't know if you've seen Miracles and Wonder.
no, I haven't. I haven't. When did that one come out?
Last year.
Oh, okay. Okay. Great. Okay. So
I'll
we,
show you. I'll show you.
yeah, please bring us.
I I'm coming close to the end of my full-time teaching, so this one surprised me. It turned into a very different focus toward the miracles in the Bible, which
Okay.
I used to skip over, and now I love them
Okay. Fantastic.
because the Bible teaches that miracles happen even when we think they won't. So I'm hoping for one.
Yeah, there's still miracles. I mean, I see some stuff in my life. I think there's a miracle sometimes. So
Yes.
so where can people
People find you.
contact you or get your books? I mean, like unless you
This
want people
one,
to contact you, I don't know.
I think this one, I think, has come out in Britain and now in Spanish and
Oh, okay.
Romanian and a few other languages,
And
French.
Have you got a website, Elaine?
I do. And yes, I don't keep it up very much, but I do it because it's helpful to see the full range of the books. For a very personal one, the story I told about why I studied Satan is in the book Why Religion. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a book about why I wrote it. It's a very personal thing. I never thought I'd publish it, but I just thought, well, it's just somebody's life, you know, it's about why I study religion.
yeah,
So
okay. Wonderful.
anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine.
Good talk.
Have a good evening.
You have a
Thank you.
great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, hey. Bye.
Nice, man. Cool. I had a bit of technical difficulties there in the beginning, man. The camera that I was using over here, I just kept delay. And I'm like, fuck. While Elaine was busy there, I'm trying to like figure out my camera on the on the laptop, which I eventually managed to get it going. So yeah.
I know, so that's why I just started recording.
But yeah, very interesting, man.
Yeah. Okay, cool, dude. Do you want to do the
cool.
intro?
Yeah, awesome, guys. Thanks, guys and girls, for this week. And we will, another guest coming on next week. When is Dean coming on?
6th of August, 5th of August. So we'll have him out the week after that. So the second week of August.
Okay. So yeah, he's coming on soon. That's going to be pretty interesting as well. But thanks everybody for listening. Like and subscribe as per usual. And then we will chat next week. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Cheers, bro.